That first reading we heard, what a wonderful opening line it has. What a great opening line. It's the pessimist's dream, quite frankly. Vanity of vanities, the preacher says. Vanity of vanities. All is vanities. What a line. Now, we have to be careful here. That's not vanity in the sense of pride about one's appearance, but the preacher means more of an emptiness. All is emptiness. All is meaningless. Or to give it another translation, everything is just like a little breath. You know, on those cold winter days when you step out of the house for the first time and you see a breath in front of you for a few moments, and then it disappears because it goes cold, like everything else. That's what the preacher is saying today in that first reading. Everything is just like a passing breath. How depressing. And that's what our preacher, this Coleth, to give him his Sunday name, is saying. And he is the famous pessimist of the Bible. He is the pessimist's pessimist. He is the skeptic's skeptic, you might say. He's the one for whom the glass is always and ever half empty. He's the one, anytime he finds a silver lining, he's looking for the cloud lurking somewhere nearby. Yes, quite the pessimist, quite depressing, or so it seems. Don't get me wrong, this preacher certainly believes in God, and he believes something comes after this life, but he's not quite sure what it is. And so, at least it seems to me, what he's saying is it's sensible just for him to live in the moment, to take what comes his way, hoping for the greatest enjoyment and for the least effort for himself. But even that, it seems, in the end for him doesn't satisfy. Even this is vanity. Even this is emptiness for him. And the preacher's words, his feelings, his sentiments, well, they're echoed by the rich man with his harvest in today's gospel too. Take things easy, eat, drink, have a good time. You only live once, don't worry about anything else, just enjoy yourself. That's the sentiments, the feelings that both of these men seem to present to us. And we know too that they are attitudes, they are worldviews that are quite common today. All that matters is the material. Eat, drink, have a good time. Take it easy, you only live once. What are we to make of all this? How do we respond to these very real questions, these very real points made in the readings today? Well, we don't despair, don't worry. Our second reading, especially in the words of Christ today, point to the answer. In contrast to the preacher, St. Paul points us to a deep and meaningful vision of human life, of human experience. He points to the truth of who God is and what God offers us. Because Paul, unlike our preacher, has experienced the risen Christ. Paul, unlike our preacher, has come to know something of Jesus Christ. And so when he writes that second reading today, that letter to the Colossians, he speaks in concrete terms of the life, of the death, and the resurrection of Christ, which gives us so much meaning. Since you have been brought back to life with Christ, Paul says, you must look for the things that are in heaven, where Christ is with God. Let your thoughts be on heavenly things and not on things of this earth. What does all that mean? Well, when we look for heavenly things, I'm not asking you to put your head in the clouds or for wishful thinking or anything like that. Don't worry. What I'm saying is we need to look for those things which last, those things which abide. And at their very base, at their very foundation, is that love which God offers us, that friendship which God offers us, and that all that flows from that relationship we have with God, all that flows from the fact that we are made in God's image and God's likeness. Paul mentions that in his reading today too. And it's an image which we renew, or which rather is renewed in us every time we come to the Mass, every time we approach the various sacraments. We know that the things of earth, last only a short time. We know that the things of earth can only satisfy us for a short time, and they can never truly satisfy our heart's desires, because our hearts are made for the things of heaven. Our hearts are made for God. We know that. We know that our hearts can only be satisfied when they rest in God. We're made for what's above. We're made for the things of heaven. So this heavenly thinking is not wishful thinking. It's focusing on what's truly and deeply important. And all this heavenly thinking has a beginning too. Since you have been brought back to true life with Christ. Well, what is that? That begins with our baptism, or becoming members of Christ, of his body, that we die and rise again with Christ in baptism. That's where it all starts. That's where it all begins, in order that we might live a life for and with God. Because you have died, and now the life you have is hidden with Christ in God, Paul says in that second reading. A wonderful answer in so many ways to our preacher today. Because by our baptism, we are given this new life in Christ. This Christ who takes us from the darkness and gives us the light, transfers us into his own kingdom, Paul says elsewhere. So the truly human life, the deepest meaning and purpose of our human life, is seen in Christ, in the light of a life lived in and with Christ. It points us to all that will make us truly happy, deeply and lastingly so. And that's why Paul too mentions in that reading that we've just heard, to put to death, to kill anything in us that is not of Christ, that anything is only worldly, which will hold us back. You must kill everything that belongs only to earthly life, he says, because we know these things will only harm us or hold us back, not give us that true happiness. So with all of that, he calls us, St. Paul, to let go of the things which hold us back in our spiritual lives and focus on the things of heaven, that new life, that true life with Christ. You have stripped off your old behavior with your old self, and you progress in the image of your Creator. Now, I won't lie, for some of us, that stripping away of the old life, of the old self, is difficult. It's not something that happens all at once like that, in the blink of an eye or the click of a finger. It takes a lifetime sometimes, and sometimes, well, we can slip back into the old ways. But the promise of Christ in the gospel and in the second reading is that he will be with us. He is always there offering us that new life. He is always there offering us that love and that relationship with him. Always an offer of renewal. There's nothing vain or empty about that promise. It's a promise we hear in St. Matthew's Gospel. I will be with you until the end of time. I will be with you till the close of the age. So that's our response to the preacher's pessimism and to the attitude of the rich man with the harvest. And by the way, our response to that pessimism isn't just optimism, it's hope. A very different thing altogether. The hope we place in Christ. For St. Paul also tells us there is only Christ. He is everything, and he is in everything. Christ is the answer to the pessimism of the preacher and to the world views we hear today. In Christ we don't find vanities, we don't find emptiness, we don't find meaninglessness, we find fullness, we find meaning. The fullness of life found in the promises of God who loved us and gave himself for us. And to sum up and to finish, there's a wonderful line from a book called The Imitation of Christ by St. Thomas à Kempis, where he mentions our first reading. He says, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Yes, it is, unless we know God and serve God and love him with all of our hearts.